conference as well. So I want to thank them also. But with that being said, I just want to say, introduce Parker Williams with TD Bank and just ask if he has a few words.
Yeah, Michael, I really appreciate it. TD loves being able to sponsor this event. You hit the nail on the head. We think, developing young professionals is a really key aspect in developing, a network amongst each other as we all grow and move along in our careers is absolutely key to everyone's success and the success of the business community. So we are happy to sponsor this event. I'm very excited for today's. Props to the Merrimack Valley Chamber. The last several events for this have been very on point with COVID related things. I feel like, the last one was on nutrition, which was a key aspect that we're all suffering from. And this one is on board games. And I think board games have had a massive resurgence with everyone kind of being inside and at home. I love board games. And so I'm really excited to hear about the business side of board games. So I look forward to it.
Perfect. Well, thank you. We appreciate it, Parker, and thank you to TD Bank. I just want to say welcome to Danielle. She's one of our NGL ambassadors, so thank you for joining us today. And thank you to everyone else who joined us also either live or on Facebook Live also. We appreciate you joining us today. With that being said, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, George Burtch. George Burtch has been a member of the Chamber for 3 or 4 years now, but he's been great to work with. He's been telling us that, we hear about, his Birch Tree Advisors. He's there to help people, help them grow personally, business-wise as well. And he told me he used to be with Hasbro for his whole life. And I said, that sounds interesting. So that's how today arrived. But George has a number of great qualities about his business and Birch Tree Advisors. So I'm trying to ask him real quick to tell us about that. And then we can get into the program.
So yes, my company is Birch Tree Advisors. I really focus on business coaching. I like to talk. I'll make no qualms about it. I love public speaking. It's one of my passions. I have done all kinds of public speaking, but I have really enjoyed this part of my life because I'm learning how to listen. And that's really what a business coach does. Any misconceptions that anybody has about a coach, a business coach is not like a sports coach. Sports coach tells you what to do, when to do, how to do it, and how often you're going to do it. A business coach is the exact opposite. A business coach is a guide to help you unlock the answers to the challenges that you might have. So I am really enjoying becoming an aggressive listener. And I certainly enjoy the opportunity to be able to talk for a little bit about something I have a lot of passion for. That's board games.
Thank you.
So can I go now?
Yep, of course.
Okay, so the last time I got to talk about board games, I got to tell you, it took me about 50 minutes to take my first breath, and by then they were coming to get the hook out. So I know Ray Ann and Michael will keep me under control here. I'm going to share some of my experiences today in the world of board games and kind of try to connect them to what I've learned and some business applications and some personal applications. I had a great career. I worked for Milton Bradley, Hasbro for 40 years. I have no regrets except for maybe one. And that I kind of wish that maybe I had done a little better job of applying all the things that I learned. And I guess that, at my advanced years, it's probably a little too late for that. But now my passion is helping other people identify what their purpose is and helping them to be successful. So if the opportunity presents itself, you'll have to excuse me. I may add a shameless plug where appropriate while I'm talking. So I started at Milton Bradley in 1973. I was going to Westfield State to be a history teacher, a high school history teacher, and I got a job in the warehouse during the summer. And I ended up not leaving. And boy, did I have fun. I got to attend the World Scrabble Championship in Las Vegas and meet 30 of the smartest people that I'd ever been around. I went to the Rubik's Cube World Championship in Budapest. You ever seen somebody solve 5 Rubik's Cubes in 45 seconds?
Wow.
Huh? Yeah, pretty amazing. I went to the Magic the Gathering World Championships in Paris. Amazing. We had to cover the 30-foot angel we had there because she was too threatening for the dentists that were also having a convention in the Louvre where we were. In 1983, we did the Monopoly National Championships on a train from Chicago to Philadelphia, and then we bussed everybody to Atlantic City and had the finals at the Showboat on the boardwalk. That next year, the World Championships in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace, and I got to be the PA announcer. I did a press conference in Moscow with headphones, translators at the Moscow Toy Fair. I got to go to Riga, Latvia and present the vice mayor with his copy of the World Edition of Monopoly, and met Tony Blair, the Prime Minister of England's wife, at an event for Monopoly Here and Now at the right outside of the big Ferris wheel there in London. I had dinner with Vince McMahon, The Rock, sat in the front row of WrestleMania. And probably the highlight of my career was, any electronic gamers here? Does anybody play video games?
Here and there.
Well, for 2 years, I worked for Hasbro Interactive, and I was in charge of our booth at E3, and I got to throw a party that cost $650,000. Has anybody ever spent $650,000 in one day?
Nope.
Huh? I tell you how you spell that. F-U-N. So the first thing I want to talk about is purpose and passion. And I want to talk about Milton Bradley and George Parker. They were real people. Milton Bradley was a lithographer, was a draftsman by trade who became a lithographer. George Parker was a kid when he founded Parker Brothers. Milton Bradley played games for leisure. George Parker, bedroom when he was 16 years old, was filled with board games. It was his passion. Milton Bradley left Hartford in 1857 and went up to Springfield and got a job at the Wasson Train Company. Wasson closed, so he opened up a draftsman studio. That wasn't doing much for him, so he became a lithographer. He went and learned how to print. He had the only lithography press outside of Boston in Massachusetts. Business wasn't good. He had goals. He had a girlfriend. He was in love. He wanted to get married, but he wanted to have enough money. And he was depressed. And he went to his friend's house and they played a game. And on the way home, he had an idea for a game. And that's how the checkered game of life was born. And he completed his game and he took it to New York City and he sold enough. And he came back and somebody convinced him to do a lithograph of Abraham Lincoln. And they were selling like hotcakes until somebody bought one in and threw it at him and said, "This is worthless." Because Abe, between the time he got elected and the time he got inaugurated, went and grew a beard. And Milton Bradley's lithograph didn't have a beard, so Milton Bradley got into the game business. But games was not Milton Bradley's passion. Education was Milton Bradley's passion. At one time, Milton Bradley was the largest educational supplier in the United States. Milton Bradley has actually been credited with being instrumental to the spread of public schools, especially in the southern part of the United States. Because whenever a public school system would open up, he'd put a warehouse there so he could provide school supplies to them. He was one of the innovators of kindergarten in the United States. Games just fueled his passion. He was often at odds with the people that ran the Milton Bradley Company because the things that he did in education weren't profitable. They wanted him spending more time on games. I mean, he still found time to write the modern rules of croquet. He patented the one-arm paper cutter. He was an entrepreneur, but his passion was education. Milton Bradley opened his company in 1860. In 1886, 100 miles to the east, well, actually in 1883, a 16-year-old George Parker took his life savings, $50, and then came up with a game called banking. Went to Boston and sold it, went to Providence and sold it. Made enough money to get himself to start in college. And then as he was going through college, he realized that wasn't for him. He had a job offer. Then he got another job offer that would have paid him more money than he had ever made in his life. and he had to make a choice because his passion was games, board games. So he went with his passion and he opened a board game company that would eventually become Parker Brothers. Our lesson here is that your passion doesn't have to be your work. Okay, you're all too young to remember Wonderlic. Wonderlic was an intelligence test. When you were getting a job in the office at Milton Bradley, you had to take this intelligence test. One person got a perfect score that I knew of. He was a good friend of mine. He spent his 35-year career sitting at the same desk, inputting data. He would take the bill of materials and input it into the computer. That was the job he had for 35 years. One time I was with an associate, and we were going to be there till probably 8 o'clock that night because we had a show the next day. We had a customer coming in. And we walked by my friend, and he goes, "You know, that guy got a perfect score on the Wonderlic?" I go, "Yeah, he's a pretty smart guy." He goes, "What a waste." He goes, "He's been doing that same thing for all these years. He's never gotten a different job." I said, "What a waste." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "That's one of the most successful people that I know." And he looked at me. I go, "What are you and I going to be doing today? How late are we going to be here tonight?" He goes, "Well, we'll be here probably around 8 o'clock. I said, "You know what Brad's going to do? At about 3:27, he's going to start looking at the clock. And then when it hits 3:30, he's going to clean up his desk, going to go get his jacket on, and he's going to go home and he's going to stop at the package store in Hamden. And he's going to buy a King 6-pack of Budweiser. He's going to go home and he's going to get changed and he's going to go out on his boat on the Connecticut River while you and I are working here." So who's successful? So I learned that it's not about how much, okay? It's about what. What's your purpose? Why do you get up in the morning? And if work is just a means to accomplish what it is that you really want to do, that's great. We all can't wear the brass ring. If everybody's trying to wear the brass ring, who's going to clean the outhouses? Right? The second thing that happened to me that really reinforced that was that in 1999, I got laid off at Hasbro Interactive. Hasbro Interactive was tanking. So after 26 years with Hasbro, Milton Bradley, I figured that's done, time to do something different. And then I got a phone call from my friend who was going to become the vice president of R&D. He had been the senior vice president of marketing. He was switching over R&D. He goes, "I got a job. I need you to come back." And I said, "No." I said, "I'm not going back to East Long Meadow." I said, no interest. So he badgered me for a couple of weeks and he called me on a Tuesday. He goes, "Listen, I got to make a decision on this job on Friday. So get your head out of your butt and get in here and do this." And I said, "I don't want to do it. I don't want to go back." So I hung up the phone and I looked at my wife and I said, "Geez, I might have just turned down the best job in the games business." He wanted me to come back as a director of inventor relations. I would go around the country meeting with game inventors. So I told my wife that. She looked at me. She goes, "Good, call him back and tell him to take it. I want to go home." And those of you that are married understand exactly what I did next. So I took it. And for 9 months, I was the head of inventor relations. And I got offered a promotion after 9 months. And of course, I took it. I probably shouldn't have, because it was the best job I ever had. And the reason it was the best job I ever had was the inventors were intoxicating. Their passion, their entrepreneurial spirit. Some of you might be in business for yourself. You know what it's like not to have a paycheck coming in every week. Some of you know what it's like when you present something and you're part of it. It's not just an idea, it's your heart and soul are part of that. It really woke me up. So the question that I have for you is, what's your purpose? Why do you get up in the morning? A lot of people, 76% of people are doing a job they don't really want to do. That means if there's 8 of us here, 6 of us are doing something that we don't want to do. But that's okay, because making a lot of money or material things might not be your purpose. And the last thing I'll say about purpose is just, identify your purpose, but also if you have people working for you, understand what their purpose is. You want to be an effective leader? Feed their purpose. Don't try to make your purpose their purpose. Okay, effective leaders understand what motivates people and then motivate them. Effective leaders don't impart what it is that they want out of life on other people. In 1933, Parker Brothers was on the verge of bankruptcy. As a matter of fact, in early 1934, Parker Brothers laid off everybody that worked there. And then they set up a table in another part of their factory in Salem where they interviewed everybody they laid off, and the people that they wanted to keep, they kept, and the people that were so-so performers, they let go. And everybody was at a significantly reduced salary. Now, you all know what was going on in 1933, right? The Great Depression. So in 1917, this woman invented this game called the landlord's game. Well, in 1934, this guy by the name of Charles Darrow took that landlord game and he prettied it up a little bit. He made these pretty cool deed cards that had a colored line across the top. Gussied up the board so that it had those colored lines too. Wrote some really complicated rules, and he bought it to Milton Bradley, and he said, "I got this game called Monopoly," and they said no. And he bought it to Parker Brothers, and he goes, "I got this game called Monopoly," and they said no. So he went back, disappointed. He went to McLaughlin Brothers, who said no. He had nobody that wanted to kind of do his game. So what did he do? He did it himself. Started selling it in Philadelphia. Well, George Parker, who was in his 70s at this time, had said no to Monopoly. He thought that the rules were too complicated. He didn't think that people would be interested in playing a real estate game in the middle of the Depression. But his son-in-law heard about what was going on in Philadelphia, sent one of his salesmen down to check it out, and heard some good things, so he took a shot. Called up Charles Darrow, and Parker Brothers decided they were going to do Monopoly in 1935. They sold 1 million units at $3, $2, $3 a piece. They made more money than they had ever made in the history of their company in the middle of the Depression. Why? Because they took a risk. They took a risk when people probably would have told them it's crazy to take a risk. Risk taking is always a gamble. In 1984, Milton Bradley took a risk. It turned out to be a disaster, and it cost him the company. Electronic games came to be in the late 1970s, Atari and ColecoVision. And what ended up happening was that Milton Bradley did Simon, and it was a great success. Parker Brothers had Merlin. It was a great success. Everybody was speculating that the board game was dead. We're going to be in the video game, the electronic game mode. And as fast as it came, it started petering out just as quickly. But in 1983, Milton Bradley had kind of sat it out. But in 1983, in a kind of a desperate move, Milton Bradley was pretty heavy in cash. They bought a company called GCE. And they bought an item called Vectrex. And the thing about Vectrex was it was a video game machine, but you didn't hook it up to your TV. It came with the TV. The TV was part of it, and it was a disaster. And Milton Bradley came out of that fighting off hostile takeover bids. So in 1984, I took a job in play school in Chicago. I was an industrial engineering supervisor. Milton Bradley had bought play school in the late 1960s. And one day I wake up and found out Milton Bradley had been bought by a smaller company, Hasbro. So 2 examples. One, you take a risk during the Great Depression when you have nothing and you roll the dice and you turn it into the game. You take a risk when a business is failing and you think that you're going to get into it at the rear end and it costs you your company. So what's the lesson learned there? You got to take risks. Okay. I mean, I'll talk a little bit more about risk taking and the lack of risk taking and what it costs you. But I learned that risk taking is a good thing. Okay, as long as you can handle the prospect of failure, right? I mean, as long as you understand what the dark side of it is, take risks. Risks are a good thing. They're a good thing for your business and they're a good thing for you. In 1959, a fellow by the name of Reuben Claimer took an art craft set to Milton Bradley to show to Jim Shea, the president of Milton Bradley. And he was excited about it. Now, Reuben had just missed out on the big one, okay, because he was in the hula hoop thing. All right. And Whammo ended up being the big hula hoop guy, but Reuben missed it by a whisker. So he was reeling. He was looking for something. So he went there and Jim Shea looked at him. He goes, Reuben, I don't need another craft set. What I do need, though, I need a game to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Milton Bradley Company. When Reuben was walking out of Jim Shea's office, we always at Milton Bradley, we had something. It was a picture of the game board of the checkered game of life, Milton Bradley's first game. And we would use that for local advertising. Like if we did a sponsorship somewhere or we were doing a local ad, we would always use that. And it was on the wall and Reuben saw that. And that was his inspiration for the game of life. Anybody ever played the game of life? Huh? The game of life was much better when I was a kid. We ruined it for you. In 1994, we decided we had to make life more contemporary and add life tiles and things like that. And we took away the revenge space. And the revenge space was awesome. Because if you landed on revenge, you could take $100,000 from the player of your choice. You want to talk about a power trip at a board game. Okay, you want to talk about understanding people not making eye contact with you. Land on the revenge space and start looking at the people around the board or who you were going to scarp $100,000 from. That was power. So what did I learn from? I became very good friends with Reuben. I'm still good friends with him. I talked to him 2 weeks ago. He's 98 years old. And he's still trying to think of ideas for how he can make more money from his penthouse overlooking the Pacific Ocean. When any of you were kids, did you ever have the Fisher-Price inline skate, the ones that go forward that you put on your sneakers that went forward but wouldn't go backwards? Yeah, he invented those too. So what I learned from Reuben is that you don't have to be first. Okay, you have to be better. All right, you don't always have to come up with the idea. Sometimes it's okay to take an idea and refine it, make it yours, fix it, whatever. But you don't always have to be first. You just got to be better. So I told you about Milton Bradley and GCE, the thing that kind of cost Milton Bradley their company. And the other thing that I learned from that was not to get ahead of yourself. It's a fine line, and I'm going to tell you a story about board games where we refuse to try to get ahead of ourselves and it costs us dearly. Okay, but you always got to be careful about getting ahead of yourself. What do you do good? Okay, how many of you ever got a report card that had 4 good grades and 1 bad grade on it? Okay, and what was the reaction when you got home?
People looked at the 1 bad one rather than the 4 good ones.
Right? you know, so how often do we do that to ourselves? Okay, how often do we have an experience where, yeah, everything went great except for that? And what do? We dwell on that thing that didn't go right. Okay, what if we got one good mark and all bad marks? Then what would happen? Then there'd be hell to be paid, right? What would have happened if somebody looked at that and said, gee, they're really good at this. Why don't we focus on this? Why don't we really exploit this for that? Okay, we were really good at making board games. You know, we were really good. We were efficient. I mean, the remnants of Milton Bradley still make board games. For 20 years, the factory in East Long Meadow was the only manufacturing facility left in the United States in the entirety of the toy and game business of any significance. We were really, really good at it. Why did we go out and buy a video game company? You know, think about that for a while. In 1982, three drunks up in Canada used to play a trivia game in their garage. And they somehow came up with the idea that this would be a great game. So they had a couple of things. They made up this weird game board with pie wedges, and they made all their questions were campy. Like, they wrote all the questions to be a little bit different. You know, you didn't just ask what the capital of something. You know, it was the questions were part of the experience. And they packaged this up and they bought it to Milton Bradley. Milton Bradley said, no, nobody's interested in a trivia game. They bought it to Parker Brothers. They said, no, nobody's going to be interested in questions and answers. Plus, there's no market for adult games. The adult game market was two games, Scrabble and Yahtzee. That was enough. You know, kids played games. Preschoolers played games. Family played games. Adults don't play games with other adults. Board games with other adults, don't be silly. So they did it themselves up in Canada. And then this small company in Pleasantville, New York, called Selshaw and Ryder, who were the makers of Scrabble, said, oh, we'll give it a shot. 1983. In 1984, Trivial Pursuit. Is any of you alive in 1984? Did you ever get pushed off to a babysitter while mom and dad went out with the neighbors and drank themselves silly while they played Trivial Pursuit? Because that's what happened on Saturday nights in America, my friends. 18 million units at $30 a piece in 1984. Trivial Pursuit was bigger than Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers combined. Okay, one item bigger than the two biggest game companies in the world combined. Okay, it redefined what people did on a Saturday night. Have you ever played Trivial Pursuit? You ever played it with a group of people? Trivial Pursuit's one of my favorite games for two reasons. Okay, my mind is a virtual fountain of meaningless information. Okay, so Trivial Pursuit is right up my alley. The second thing, Trivial Pursuit has one of the greatest game dynamics of any game on earth. Okay, and I will describe it to you. You read a question, and somebody on the team answers the question correctly right away. And then for the next 5 minutes, you get to sit there and watch his teammates talk him out of the correct answer. Okay, it is a wonderful, beautiful thing to watch. But what's the lesson that we learn from Trivial Pursuit? It's a really simple one. None of us is as smart as all of us. What?
I was going to say your first instincts are correct.
No, it's the opposite of that, Parker. I mean, it really is. It's that none of us is as smart as all of us. Think about all the times that you played Trivial Pursuit that nobody could answer the question when it was read. And as you started to piece together your personal experiences, how many times you were able to figure out the right answer? There's a business application to that. Okay, we always don't have to try to go it alone. You know, really, Trivial Pursuit to teach us two things. The other thing that I got out of Trivial Pursuit was the real expert at doing something is the person doing it. And I got there because Trivial Pursuit taught me never, ever just look at somebody and expect what you're going to get out of them. Sometimes you can get the nugget from the most unexpected places. So there's lessons to be learned in games. If you're interested in what the moral games in when Milton Bradley first opened Milton Bradley, games were a moral thing. In the 1860s, there were no dice in games because dice were considered immoral. Right? Learning wasn't fun back then. You know, the learning was the learning wasn't fun. That you know, Milton Bradley brought a whole new approach to learning by trying to make it fun. But there's lessons to be learned in games. If you're interested, if you're really a board game enthusiast, there's a great book. There's a game company in Danvers called Winning Moves. And the president of that company has written several books. He's written several Monopoly books. He's written a book called The Game Makers about the history of Parker Brothers. But he just wrote a book called Tortured Cardboard. Okay, and we talk about tortured cardboard because of what we used to do to paper, die cut it and chop it up. But it's called Tortured Cardboard. It's by Phil Orbanes. And it talks about 15 or 16 iconic games. He travels back in time to when it was invented and talks about the inventor. And then he finishes it up by talking, well, what's the real life lesson we learned from that game? So if you're a board game enthusiast, I think you'd find it an interesting read. In 1999, we bought we bought Avalon Hill. Does anybody know what Avalon Hill was? You ever heard of Acquire or Diplomacy or, well, Avalon Hill was those 4-hour games. I used to say they were played by guys that lived in mom's basement that had egg yolk all over their sleeveless t-shirt. And we bought Avalon Hill. And I was working at Hasbro Interactive at the time. I was the director of marketing services. I was getting phone calls, you know, because if somebody called Hasbro Interactive and the person didn't know what they were talking about, they sent them to me. I got about 10 phone calls from Avalon Hill enthusiasts saying, you're going to ruin Avalon Hill. And you know what? They were right. You know, we bought Avalon Hill, these gamer games, and what did we do? We went and set up an end cap at Target, thinking that we're going to sell Avalon Hill games on an end cap at Target. Disaster. And before long, I was overseeing the destruction of about 100 skids of Avalon Hill product. But the real lesson for us came in the mid 1990s. So in 1977, 78, Atari came out, ColecoVision. That came and went. The next wave was Sony PlayStation and Nintendo and Xbox, and that wasn't going anywhere. And pretty soon, video games dwarfed the tradition. I mean, the traditional toy business was much bigger than the board game business, but pretty soon, video games dwarfed our business. It was probably 80-1. And people were seeing the death of board games, that board games would be yesterday's news. I mean, who would want to play, what kid would want to play Operation when they could play Duke Nukem? And so, you know, it was looking like, you know, we were done. From 1984 till 1998, we had record years. You know, you stop and think about, you know, we went through economic downfalls. Went through the whole video game craze, and by 1988, video games were it. We had record years. What did we do? I mean, we had a formula. We advertised preschool games to mom, kid games to kids, family games to mom, and adult games to adult. You know, pretty simple. So what did we do to sustain our business during the video games? We stopped advertising games. We started selling something different. What did we sell? We sold social interaction. We sold the experience of playing a game. We went to our champion. And who was our champion? Mom. You think mom felt good about throwing Duke Nukem in the shopping cart for their kid? Huh? You think mom feels good about throwing Grand Theft Auto in the shopping cart for their 10-year-old? Huh? No, we went to mom. We told mom every night of the week, one night every week, you should play games. Why? There's benefits to playing games. And stop and think about it. Okay, I mean, board games are not what they once were. But think about your board game experiences. Are they always about what happened in the game? Remember that Christmas when we were playing Monopoly when your sister told your parents that she was pregnant? Remember that time we were playing Trivial Pursuit and this happened? Remember this? It's about what happens around the table too. You know, the board game experience wasn't just what happened in the game. It was what happened around the table as people were interacting with each other. How does that apply to your business? Okay, how do you look beyond your business for what you think it is to what it might be for the person that's receiving the benefit of it? How often do you put yourself in your consumer's mindset to understand what it is about your product that is appealing to them? We did that. It saved our business. If we had continued down the road that we were going, we would have failed. But it saved our business. Conversely, our lack of ability to do that in another area ended up being the downfall of our business. And if we had recognized this other thing, chances are Hasbro would have never had the opportunity to buy Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers. You see, because we thought we were content being a big fish in a little pond. We owned the board game business. Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers owned the board game business. And we were convinced that we had to protect our brands as board games in order to protect our business. And it turned out we couldn't have been more wrong. Take Monopoly as an example. Our president was fiercely against doing any other type of version of Monopoly other than Monopoly. We did Monopoly, we did Deluxe Monopoly. And as far as he was concerned, that was it. Anything else would cannibalize Monopoly and destroy the brand. We used to have these line reviews, and the chairman of Hasbro and all the bigwigs would come and we'd show them the product line. And the chairman wanted us to do Star Wars Monopoly. And our president was fighting with him like crazy. And finally, in something you don't see often, our chairman was actually pretty mild-mannered. He slammed his fist on the table so hard that people's papers jumped up, and he goes, "Dave, we're doing Star Wars Monopoly." So Dave knew that he had lost the war, so he started fighting another battle, and he got an agreement that we would put limited edition on the box. Well, I got a call from legal about 4 months after we released the product saying you need to change the Star Wars Monopoly because after shipping 500,000 units, it's not a limited edition anymore. It was a runaway success. Our lesson learned was we did not realize the potential of our portfolio of brands outside of the world of board games. We didn't realize that we weren't a board game company. We were the keeper of brands, right? We had great brands that could translate into other things. When you look at what's the most successful promotion McDonald's does,
Monopoly.
Yep, it's Monopoly. Okay, I remember the first time we did McDonald's Monopoly. We did it with NASCAR, and Bill Elliott had his car painted like the Monopoly board for races. So whatever business that you're in, always be thinking about what can this be. Always have a mindful eye on, okay, I got to do what we do well, but what else can it be? What else can I do? And when you think about yourself, think about it in those terms also. Okay, we should always be striving to improve ourselves. I learned that lesson from being in the board game business. We stopped striving to be, we thought we had it knocked. We had the formula. We were the king. We were the king of the board game. But there were other opportunities that we could have been a smaller player in, that we could have maximized the value of our brands. We missed that. We missed that because we were too narrow in our thinking. My final thought is about kind of a continuation of what I was just talking about. It's about complacency. Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers were great companies. They're what New England is all about. If you went to Salem, generations of people in Salem worked at Parker Brothers. Milton Bradley, Springfield, Massachusetts. I used to yearn. Anybody ever been to the Big E? Huh? You been to the Big E? You haven't been to the Big E? You been to the Topsfield Fair? Huh? The Big E is the Topsfield Fair on steroids. Okay, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like 17 days, 1.3 million visitors. You get to see all-star shows like Gary Puckett and Union Gap. But every state has a building at the Big E that is actually, that's the state's property. So the state of Connecticut building at the Big E in West Springfield, that's the Connecticut. And I always had this desire to have a map of Massachusetts at the Big E and a star on Salem and a star on Springfield, and proclaim Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers the board game capitals of the world. And think about the great brands that Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers had. Monopoly, Sorry, Risk, Clue, Life, Operation, Battleship, Connect Four, Guess Who, Mousetrap. I mean, it's endless, the amount of brands that Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers had. And what did we do with them? We did board games. Okay, when we got through the video games, and what did we do when we discovered, we had insights that time compression was becoming a real inhibitor to people playing games? Okay, we ignored it. And then one day, lo and behold, all of a sudden everybody's got a handheld device, right? Kids 8-year-old got a handheld device. I gave a talk at the Springfield museums, and I told them, I said, someday when we're all gone, a couple is going to be looking in the delivery room at their newly born set of thumbs. Okay, because that's what we're going to evolve to, a set of thumbs. And we missed it. We were complacent. And then one day we woke up and our business was 60% of what it used to be. Why? Because people were getting their gaming experience on their handheld device, and they were getting it when they wanted it, and they were getting it for how long that they wanted it. They didn't have to take a box down. They didn't have to read instructions. And we knew this was happening, but we ignored it. Okay, so my lesson there, when you see something that's going to impact your business, address it. Okay, how many of you manage people? Anybody? Okay, so you ever have a problem that you just gave you a pit in your stomach knowing that you had to deal with it? Huh? You got an issue, geez, I hired my friend and they're a bum. Now what the hell am I going to do? Or I got two people that I love them both, but they can't get along, and I got to tell them they can't. What do I do? You got that pit in your stomach? You know what I'm talking about? And how many times has doing nothing worked for you? You know, thinking that, oh, it'll take care of itself. You know, it applies to us, it applies to business, it applied to board games. You know, doing nothing ended up being the thing that really, and now, as Parker said earlier, all of a sudden, we're back. You ever heard of White Mountain puzzles? Jigsaw puzzles? White Mountain Jigsaw Puzzles is a New Hampshire company. They're up in Jackson, New Hampshire, a little bit north of North Conway there. And they make jigsaw puzzles the way we used to make them. Okay, nice and thick pieces. You know, when I first started at Milton Bradley, we made puzzles. The board was 090. By the time I left, it was 060, you know, because we had to cost reduce it because, you know, people wouldn't pay for puzzles. But White Mountain makes really nice, thick puzzles. So my wife is a crazy puzzler. So we took a ride up there a couple Saturdays ago, and I love going to toy stores because I spent my whole life in the business. So I'm talking to the lady, their business this year is up 1,000%. 1,000%. 10 times more than they did last year. How's that? And if you go on their website, what are they advertising? They're advertising the puzzles that they have that are back in stock, right? Board games up 65%, you know, because of what's going on with COVID and people doing. So what should Hasbro do? What should board game companies do? Last thing I learned was to be opportunistic. You know, be opportunistic. Opportunity doesn't knock often. Sometimes when it's knocking, it's that kid at Thanksgiving that rings your doorbell and then runs away. And when that happens and you go after it, you can't be discouraged. Okay, failure is part of success. After I left Hasbro, I talked my wife into an adventure, and we spent 3.5 years as live-in managers at independent living retirement communities. I had never managed a person that punched the time clock in my life. You know, the people that I managed were making $80,000 a year. I didn't have to, you know, stand over their shoulder or tell them what to do or anything like that. But I would always sit down with especially the high school kids that I'd hire, and I'd look at them and I'd say, listen, I am really easy to get along with. I'm going to try to tell you what you're supposed to do. All I ask is that you give your best effort. There's only one thing that you can do that piss me off. And then they get wide-eyed. And I'd say, don't make any mistakes. And then they would look at you and get the look. And I'd say, because if you're not making any mistakes, that tells me one thing. That means you're not doing anything. Right? I mean, I am amazed as I look back at the amount of time that people spend trying to make it look like when a mistake is made, like I didn't do it, or cover it up, or make it look like we all make them. Mistakes and failure are part of the process. As I talked to you about this little bit about my history in board games, I told you about 5 or 6 failures that we had, but board games are still here. You can still go buy Operation, you can still go buy Monopoly and all kinds of iterations. So I will leave you with the idea that I was lucky. You know, I had fun. I had a great career. I mean, I was in a business that was fun. Most of the people that I call my friends, I met through work, but that's not how we define ourselves. Okay, we define ourselves by understanding what it is that we want to do. And if what you want to do is not to sit in the catbird seat, or not to make as much money, or not to have all these toys, if there's something else that is your passion, that you need to work just to make a few tokens in order to support what it is that you really want to do in life, that's great. If you can do that, consider yourselves one of the fortunate ones. So what I learned from board games, was I learned how to win. I learned how to lose. I learned how to interact with other people. I learned how to take risks. I learned how to appreciate people for what they are and never try to judge somebody by what they look like or what they talk like, to really take the time to understand them. And the most important thing that I learned from board games is it's okay to screw up. It's okay to screw up, because guess what? You can go to bed at night lamenting the fact that you screwed up, but as soon as you wake up, you got another chance to be great. So thank you for letting me talk for almost an hour about something that I obviously have a lot of passion for. We got a couple minutes. If anybody's got a question or comment, fire away.
And just so everybody knows, I put the names of those books in the chat if they want to grab them, and I have the author's name there.
George, I'll mention first of all, I want to say thank you for presenting today. And I think that's the key word of advice for any young professionals, that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fail. I think the key is, as long as you don't do it twice, you got to learn from those mistakes and failure. But no, that's a great thing. And like you said, that's what board games show you. You're not going to win every game, but you got to get up and try that next game again. So learn from what you did wrong and move forward.
Just real quick, what was everybody's favorite board game when they were a kid?
Monopoly.
Huh?
Monopoly. I have two older brothers, so it was always a challenge. That and Uno. Uno was the biggest one also.
You guys are gonna laugh, but I just learned how to play Uno like 2 weeks ago.
That's,
Oh my God.
hey, that was made by Mattel. For my whole life, I used to call Barbie that bitch.
Oh my God. Other than that, I play Monopoly at least 3 times a week because my brother has 3 different Elvis Presley Monopolies that he's obsessed with. So we play those at least 3 times a week.
Parker, what was your favorite game?
Growing up, it was probably Monopoly, but I play a lot of Parcheesi, which is very similar to sorry.
Right. Well, there's about 8 games that are based off of Parcheesi.
Yeah.
Michael?
And
Oh, go ahead, Parker.
I was gonna say, I love Connect 4 too. Big Connect 4 guy.
What was that, Michael?
Monopoly and Double Crossing. Double Crossing is a train theme game.
Oh, you're a gamer. You don't play Double Crossing in an hour, do you?
Yeah. It's about 2 hours.
Yeah. So Monopoly. Okay. At the Monopoly Championships, how long do you think a game takes?
I can't imagine.
4 people playing.
1 hour.
50 minutes.
I was gonna say 10, 15 minutes.
Right, 50 minutes. You know why? Because most people don't play by the rules.
And that's why it's so long.
In Monopoly, okay, if you land on a space and you don't buy it, it's supposed to go to auction. Really, in Monopoly, you should go around the board 4 times and every property should be owned. It's take us 50 minutes to play 4 people playing a game of Monopoly. But in those games, didn't have the kind of banter that you had when you had your family Christmas Monopoly, or when you play with your brother or something like that. I will leave you with my favorite thing about Monopoly. And based on my life story, you'll understand some more about me. Monopoly is the only game where you can lose and still be satisfied. Right? What better feeling is there than to have somebody land on your property with that bright red hotel on it, and as soon as they land on it, they don't have enough money to pay you. And you get to sit there and watch them count their money, turn their deed cards over to see what the mortgage value is, and you're just sitting there grinning because you know that their next trip is a refrigerator to get something to drink because they're all done with this Monopoly game. Okay? What other game can you get satisfaction like that and still end up losing?
That's awesome.
So thank you, everybody. I hope to see you at future events. I steered clear of the shameless plugs. for today, but I thank you for letting me bore you with one of my favorite passions, board games.
Thank you, George. We appreciate it. And any last questions at all? Well, that being said, I just want to say thank you, everyone. Our Young Professionals program will continue in 2021 in January, so we look forward to seeing you there. We again thank you to TD Bank for their sponsorship throughout the whole year. We definitely appreciate that. And then the other thing I just want to mention is that tomorrow at 11 a.m., correct, Ryan? Yep, 11 a.m. We have the New England Patriots historian Bob Hildberg for a webinar. If anyone's interested in registering, they can go to merrimackvalleychamber.com. But thank you to everyone. Happy Thanksgiving if we don't see you. And thank you to George as well.
Hey, listen, everybody, I am a New York Giants fan, so I hate the Patriots, okay? But I just read a book by Ron Burton that talked about the history of the Patriots. And if you're a football fan and you're a Patriot fan, get the book. I just had the book here. Oh, here it is. Can you see that?
Yep.
Right? It's about the history of the New England Patriots from their inception to when they won the Super Bowl in 2001. It's called From Darkness to Dynasty, and it's a great read. It really gives us some great insight into Billy Sullivan, the original owner of the New England Patriots, who just refused to fail. So,
Can I tell you something really quick about the Patriots?
What's
Sorry.
that?
huh?
Can I tell you guys something really quick about the Patriots?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, so I had a Patriots themed wedding, and on my invites and everything, it said for everyone to wear red, white, and blue, to support our theme. So we have one couple that is New York Giants fans, and they had asked, can we wear our New York Giants colors, or, well, our jerseys, because they're the same colors. And I said, absolutely not. You don't come to my wedding dressed that way. And they both said, okay, so then we'll come naked. And I said, absolutely not. Let's not do that. So they both came to our wedding, and they had shirts made up saying we're diehard fans of New York Giants, but for today we're Patriots fans for Heidi and Fred. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, they're a bigger man than me. I don't know if I could ever wear a Patriot. God. I try to explain to people what it's like being a Giant fan living 40 miles north of Boston, and I don't think they quite understand.
Well, thank you to everyone again. We definitely appreciate it. Like I said, happy Thanksgiving. We don't see you. We have a number of webinars still coming before Thanksgiving, but if we don't see you, happy Thanksgiving, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.